Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Flight Lieutenant Peter Lisney, and in this episode we hear what it's like to develop a disability while serving in the RAF. We have a special edition of our news bulletin, Reheat, but first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, if you're serving in the RAF and found out you'd developed a life-changing neurological condition, how would you cope? What would the RAF think? And would you still have a job? Our correspondent, Flight Lieutenant Chris Sully, spoke with two service people who have had to deal with this kind of news.
And I actually, stupidly or not, said to the doctor, my reaction, the stuff that came out of my mouth at that time was, give me MS, I'll take MS. At those three, give me MS.
And that really annoyed me, and I had a polite run-in with Caswo at one stage where he was saying, well, everybody that's downgraded is sitting on the backsides and taking an easy life and just don't want to. And I kind of put my hand up for this. No disrespect, please don't say that to me.
So how many people have we lost over the years because of something that's not quite clear, that's not quite clearly written down? Hi, I'm Sergeant Georgie Smith, been serving for the last 22 years, still serving now. I'm currently Trade Group 17, so personnel support specialist, working in Bristol. So I manage the teleperformance office, which is the National Recruitment Centre. We have a group of civilians that work with an agency, and I manage the sort of website, the front-facing bit of the recruitment piece. So any queries, any random questions, they come centrally to myself, and then I feed them out nationally to the other AFCOs. So that's my current posting.
Hello, my name's Midge Hartley. I'm a veteran now, I served for 27 years in the RAF, and I was actually part of what was Trade Group 11, now the imagery analysis trade. Subsequently, I've left the service, I got medically discharged, and now I'm really fulfilling a kind of training role supporting that trade from an MOD perspective.
Georgie, if I can come to you first of all, just tell us a little bit about your story, your journey with the RAF and how you came to be where you are.
So I was serving for, it was roughly 17 years, as any normal service person was. And I was assigned at the time to Worthy Down, MOD Worthy Down, as a phase 2 instructor. And I'd done a tour of Afghanistan back in 2013, and sort of between 2013 and 2015, things hadn't quite been right medically. There seemed to be something not adding up. And I had lots of misdiagnoses of, one was a TIA, so a mini stroke, occipital neuralgia, which is like some form of mad migraines, which I'd never suffered with migraines before. PTSD was mentioned at one point, all of which just didn't sit right with me. But at Worthy Down, a colleague noticed that my walking, my physical walking was not quite right. So filmed me walking so that I could actually see it. And yeah, it was quite shocking actually, because I'd obviously ignored for some time and adapted to it. So I took myself to the med centre, and the doctor in the med centre was sticking pins in my left foot, and I wasn't reacting at all. So she obviously saw a bit of a red flag there and sent me straight to Winchester Hospital, A&E. So I was still in uniform, got dropped off by MT, and didn't come out for 5 days.
At that stage, what was going through your mind in terms of, I guess, you were more interested in sorting out the medical issue, but in terms of a career, were you thinking this could be a showstopper, this may be a game changer?
Yeah, absolutely. And on day 2, when I was admitted in the hospital, the doctor that was actually looking after me, the neurologist, was a reservist army officer. And so he was keeping quite a close eye on me. And I just asked him, I said, what are you actually looking for? Because no one's actually said anything. And he said, well, we don't want to say, because sometimes these things can, we're not always right and we just want to eliminate at the moment. And I said, well, just tell me what you're eliminating. So he said, okay, you're a military person. I get that you want to know. So we're trying to work out of the neurological illness family, whether you have motor neurone, Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
And at that point, it was like a brick wall. It was like, wow, what is going on? I had my grandfather on my maternal side had Parkinson's, and my aunt on my paternal side had MS. So I'd grown up with both illnesses being in the family. And I actually stupidly or not said to the doctor, my reaction, the stuff that came out of my mouth at that time was, give me MS. I'll take MS. At those three, give me MS. And it was just a stupid thing to say, but at the time, it was just my brain going, okay, I think I can cope with that disease. I think I can manage that. And I think I can still potentially keep my job with that.
That was the early stages of diagnosis. What happened next on that journey?
So on the 5th day, which was the diagnosis day, they said I had MS and that a treatment plan would be put in place in the hospital closest to my home residence, because at the time I was serving unaccompanied. So I did that 5 days completely on my own, which was really hard. And on reflection, I wish I'd actually just rang people and been honest with them and said, do you know what, just drive down the road and come see me, sort of thing, because I did it all by myself and I really shouldn't have. But what happened next really was, it absolutely changed my career, but probably for the better in a very strange way. I came up against obstacles regularly, but what that made me do was create some drive and passion towards, okay, this system is not working for people like me. The policies don't work for people like me. And the more people I met, and I got involved with Battleback actually, which was a part Help for Heroes, part MOD funded outdoor activity program. And through that, I met so many people that should and could be retained, but potentially weren't, because the system and the policies didn't allow that. And so that really drove me forwards. And I met some like-minded people. One of them was Major Mandy Islam, who has a huge name in defence. Sadly, she passed away a couple of years ago, but she created a network called CANDID, Chronic Conditions and Disability in Defence, and she selected a group of reprobates, they call us, that were confident enough to speak out and challenge the policy. And that's what we did. And that's what we continue to do now. For example, when I got promoted to sergeant, post-med board, so the med board was very positive for me. They said, you're fit to stay in, you're fit to see your contract out, you're fit to deploy, apart from the Falklands, win-win. Got promoted, and then I thought, the system works. So I've been promoted competitively against my peers with an illness. This is good, this is progress. What came next was a letter saying, but we're not signing you on to length of service 30 like everyone else. And that was the turning point for me, saying, no, not having it. I do my fitness test. You're willing to send me to Afghanistan again. I'm not having that. I'm exactly the same as the next service person. So a 2-star officer kindly took mine and a squadron leader with MS, who was in exactly the same boat, our cases back through med casework to be reviewed. And we were fortunate enough to be granted an extra 5 years service. So we didn't get the LAWS 30. We got an extra 5 years with a view to going back into battle to get the extra 3. It just gave us time. But had that not have happened, I'd be out now. And that's quite a scary thought.
What year was this happened at Worthy Down?
So 2015, I was diagnosed.
So 2015, you had 17 years, vast experience coming through the ranks and all that sort of, traveling around the world. To lose that would have just been crazy, surely.
It just completely overnight. I honestly thought I've lost everything. I hadn't. Obviously, I had a husband and 2 children, and my family were very supportive. But in my head, I joined the Air Force before my husband and before my children. It was the one thing that I had that I was independent within. So I was very passionate about, this is a big part of my life. It's been there. apart from my parents and that side of the family, it's been there before everything else. So I wanted to keep that. I wanted to retain. I wanted to have that decision myself, not someone else. And if my condition was one of which where I couldn't deploy or I couldn't do my job, then I would face facts and I'd be honest and upfront and say, call it a day, enough's enough, and look at the next chapter of my life. I seriously thought that I had so much more to give and that I wasn't done yet. No, I was far from done. But what it has given me, like I said, it changed my career for the better, because it gave me a drive and passion, not just for myself and my own battles that I was coming up against, but for other people. Because I thought, if I'm finding this hard and I'm quite a confident senior NCO, what does an SAC, what chance do they stand, or a private? And the good thing with candidates, it's tri-service, it's a defence network, it's not just air. So I felt really passionate about, let's get this message out, let's educate, let's influence, let's empower. And those three are the main principles of what I stand by. And I do many, many dial-ins throughout the year, not just talking about me and MS. I now talk about mental health and the effects of sport and activity that has. I talk about male cancer. That's a subject that's not talked about a lot. So I gather groups of people that are willing to speak, and we host these events, dial-ins, and I'm very, very passionate about that.
We'll talk some more about that, Georgie. All the way through your story there, Midge, who we're chatting to as well, was nodding and smiling, because I'm guessing, Midge, so many of the things that Georgie was describing were your experience too.
Yeah, probably on the same account. And actually, in some cases, there's some parallels there. Because one of the things that happened to me is I was originally, I think as Georgie said, I was misdiagnosed with MS prior to actually finding out about the condition that I had. So there's a lot of parallels in what she was saying, especially emotively, about how you feel and how it affects you, that run very, very similar there. Because although it turns out my condition's slightly different, it is there's a neurological side to the condition. A lot of the issues that you see match what some of the symptoms are effectively for MS. So I can fully empathise and sympathise with that from that perspective.
Talk us through your experience, your story, Midge.
Well, my story was kind of a bit like a slow boiler, is probably the best way to think about it. I joined up in 1986, which was very, very many years ago. I joined the trading then, and my first kind of unit that I went to was RAF Brampton. And I joined up because I wanted to, I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, I wanted to go out and see the world, and I was lucky enough to choose a trade that I really, really enjoyed. So for me, everything was great. I had a good sports life. I was in the early stage of my career, I was playing judo at the station level, rugby at station level, and then went on to play rugby at command level, both rugby union and rugby league. So it really did give me that whole idea of work and play being well balanced going forward. And I was able to go out and do the deployments and everything else that everybody else was doing, or that were available at the time, through the 80s into 90s and then into the noughties, so to speak. What became evident for me in doing my sport is, anybody that actually knows me within the RAF will probably say that, is one thing that made me stood out for anybody else is the fact that I had, I think as the med centre called it, an unusual gait. So basically the way that I walked, you'd look at me and go, are you all right? Are you in pain? And there was no initial discomfort there. It's just I seemed to walk very awkwardly. Now, when I was playing rugby and running around, it didn't seem to be as much of an issue. But when I had to stop, that's when it became more pronounced, and especially after playing games. Wanted to still play the sport, I just took that as, as they would say in the RF, I just walk like a biff. So I have an unusual gait. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't stop me doing what I want to do. I was still able to play sport. I was very lucky to play captain at Marham and captain at Brampton, so was reasonably successful and got to go on rugby tours and play in South Africa and the US and places like that. So from my point of view, it wasn't a limiting factor. It was just something I became known as. I mean, at one point when I was at Chicksands, it was quite funny. We had someone that turned up at the main gate without their ID one day. And the guy said to him, where do you work? And he says, oh, I work down at the Joint School of Photographic Interpretation, as it was there at Chicksands. He says, oh, do you really? Who's the person that walks funny? And he went, oh, that's Midge. So actually I became, yeah, you do work here, and on you go. So that's just the way it worked out. I got to the stage after about around about 2006, 2007, I was lucky to get promoted to flight sergeant. And I thought at this point then that, well, actually, I'm with this going to sign on a bit like Georgie, hoping to sign on from I'd got my last 30, but obviously as a flight sergeant, I then had the chance to extend to 55. So I thought, well, I better play the game here. This mobility issue, it's progressively getting a bit worse. I can still get by, I can still deploy, but it's becoming a bit harder for me to, do my 55. At least if I identify what it is, I can be positive and manage it better. And that was the whole idea about doing it. So I kind of went along to the med center and said, hey, I've got this kind of issue. It's not really been up to now. I just would like to know what it is so that I can then manage it better and take it forward and put things into place that will help me and therefore allow me to still fulfill the rest of my service within the RAF. It was kind of like opening a Pandora's box at the time, actually. I went away, I was tested and had all that. I went down to the rehabilitation centre at Honington and effectively they came back and said to me, sorry to let you know, but the symptoms that you've got and everything you've got, the lack of flexibility, the difficulty in walking, all that, we think you've got MS, which Georgie alluded to was a bit of a excuse me moment. It was very much a case of, what? Well, that's what we think you've got. What we'd like to do is send you to Edith Cavell, which was a military civilian hospital in Peterborough, let them have a look at you, give you an MRI, and then find out specifically what it is. But we think it is MS because you're showing all the signs and symptoms potentially of that condition. So touched base with the MS Centre in Huntingdon, which was quite lucky. It was on my doorstep at the time. Had a chat with them and they were very, very supportive of that. It says, if I just need to get this confirmed, but if I do, can you help me with regards to managing that? So I went along to the doctors and went to Edith Cavell, had my MRI and was kind of a good news, bad news moment. The good news was, congratulations, you've not got MS. Oh, fantastic. However, we think you should go and see a geneticist. Okay? So why would I want to go and see a geneticist? Well, we think you've got this other condition that's quite rare, and that's what we would normally, it shows a lot of symptoms of what you would associate with MS. So I went along, got a series of blood tests done, and they came back and they diagnosed me as having something called HSP. That's an abbreviation for hereditary spastic paraplesis or paraplegia. So effectively what it meant was, I think somebody wants to describe it to me in layman's terms, is it's a genetic condition that I've got. The hereditary part means it effectively manifested itself in the DNA makeup of my mum and dad. I've looked back and my mum and dad don't have the condition and neither do any generation before then. It's just I'm lucky in that way. So with that condition, what they effectively said, what's going to happen is your legs are going to die from the feet up. So that was a bit of a game changer. And well, what do you mean by that? It says, well, we don't know, but that's what we think you've got. Okay. So I went back to the med centre, had a word with them. I said, well, what do I do from here now? And they said, well, can you do your job at the moment? I went, well, yeah, I can still do my job. So they went, okay, then we'll carry on, which is a bit weird. So I effectively ended up in limbo for about 5 years, where every 6 months they'd renew my fitness. Every 2 years they'd send me to Henlow to go and see the med board. I ended up with 2 med board reviews. And effectively I was in limbo for 5 years there, where I didn't need to do the fitness test. Everybody was kind of reluctant to use me, which was a bit frustrating. I kind of wanted to deploy. They wouldn't allow me to go frontline. However, there's enough secondary and tertiary roles within my trade that I could have done. But at times the desk was very, very reluctant to do that. And I can understand they want to manage that. But from my point of view, I want to go forward. I want to contribute. I want to burden share, for want of a better word. I want to do my bit and still be effective. But sometimes the system doesn't allow you to do that, or didn't allow you to do that as much.
Midge, can I just ask you, what you're describing there, you said you felt that they were being reluctant to use you. Was that over, or was it a hidden thing? Was it just a feeling you had at the time?
I don't know. It's just a feeling I had. I mean, at one point I got, in 2010, my last deployment, I was lucky to go to Qatar, to Al Udeid, to do the ISRD role there as an acting one officer. And it was almost like 2 days before that, although everything was filled in and the desk was happy for me to go and everything else, the medical people in theatre then became reluctant because obviously I became their responsibility when I went out there. Luckily enough, Al-Udeid is such a big American base in Qatar that they have the medical facilities there. But effectively, I was fighting, I want to go. You're telling me that I should be contributing. I want to contribute. You always get that, which kind of annoys me, that feeling that when you're downgraded, there's a stigma with it. And that really annoyed me. And I had a polite running with Caswo at one stage where he was saying, well, everybody that's downgraded is sitting on the backside and taking an easy life and just don't want to. And I kind of put my hand up with his, no disrespect, please don't say that to me. I want to contribute. I want to take part. So
wow. So that was an on-record thing. Caswo at that stage told you.
He basically, what happened was, I don't think he meant it deliberately. It's very much a case of gauging your audience. But Caswo came to our place of work, or one of my places of work, and was doing the Flight Sergeant Warrant Officers type conference, and just basically said, we've got a lot of people at the moment that are in the RAF. You've got to remember this was around about 2009, 2010. So obviously things that George has helped put in place had changed that perspective. But it was very much at the time that if you were downgraded, it was almost if you were deliberately downgrading because you didn't want to deploy, you didn't want to contribute, you didn't want to take part, you just wanted an easy life. And this
would have been at that period would have been at the height of action in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere. So
from my point of view, I know he didn't mean that, and I know he didn't realise who was in his audience. But, when you're trying to fight to continue your career, continue your service, you still feel, much like Georgie said, you wish to contribute, you wish to take part. Sometimes that can feel like an unintentional kick in the teeth.
It's a huge generalisation, isn't it, as well?
And it is. And to be fair, it may well be that in some cases, some of that is true. Different people at different circumstances. And I say, if you're going to say that, it's quite a generic, broad brush approach, if you know what I mean.
So back to your story, you get to Al-Udeid, you did the tour?
Yeah, I did the tour out there. As I say, they eventually let me out there. I didn't even know I was going until 48 hours before. That was the final time it was confirmed. I flew out there, I did the job out there. I provided or managed the TAC recce coverage when the US troops left from Iraq. I kind of gave up my R&R to do that, to make sure that they were covered, and ended up getting a commendation for the work that I produced there. So from my point of view, it was showing that despite the disability, I could still do the job. And that was 2010. I'd rather hoped to maybe get another deployment in before leaving, but unfortunately that didn't come to pass. Because the final med board that I had, although the med side of it were happy to retain me, and I had 3 years left to my lost 30, because they weren't going to extend me past that, the decision was made that I was medically discharged from the service in 2013, I think it was, after I had a period of convalescence at Headley Court. Basically, they sent me down there prior to going to effectively help support me, and it was one of the best things that the service actually did.
Where was your head at that moment in time when you walked away, when that decision was delivered to you? Where was your head at, Midge?
Well, the medical discharge, it was very, very strange, actually, because, as you know, the squadron leader invites you in. He says, oh, would you mind coming to see me, the admin squadron leader? I went, yeah, of course I can. So I walked into the office to see her, thinking just a one-on-one chat. And there's a warrant officer there as well, and somebody else. And I'm going, okay, that's a bit strange. And basically, she read out the letter. She says, look, sorry to let you know, but unfortunately, the decision's come back that you've been medically discharged. I'm okay, fair enough. It wasn't a shock, because after 5 years, it was always there in the back of the mind that it could happen. And that's when I says, well, what happens now? And they said, effectively, you go on gardening leave from Monday. And I went, okay, then, well, what do I do? Because I'm meant to go to Headley Court on Monday morning. So basically, I did my time a couple of months at Headley Court. And then once that finished, I then started my resettlement and my transition, so to speak.
And in the intervening years, that was 2013, 14. In the intervening years, what are you doing now, Midge?
Well, there is a certain irony to this, that the reason why I wasn't retained is the thought, because I couldn't do front line, I effectively couldn't do the job that I was effectively kind of tasked to do within the service. What was quite ironic is, while I was down at Headley Court, a civilian MOD trainer position came up in the same office I worked as an RAF flight sergeant. So literally, I did the interviews and everything for that. And basically, I'm now doing the job in the MOD, supporting the RAF that the RAF said I couldn't do.
Georgie, when you hear stories like Midge's, and it's far from unique from that period, I'm sure, does that make you all the more sort of glad that you've taken the journey that you've taken and the changes that you and Mandy and the others have made more worthwhile?
Yeah, Absolutely. And, Midge and I go back a couple of years now. We've had quite a journey together ourselves. And it's really sad to see that, there's a whole generation there, many generations that we've lost through people being a little bit worried about risk. And I know for a fact that Mitch would have battled to and put his point across, because he's that type of chap. And everything he said is absolutely true. And I can 100% back up his words there. And so how many people have we lost over the years because of something that's not quite clear, that's not quite clearly written down? I remember my SMO showing me the neurological paragraph in the JSP. And when I say paragraph, it was a paragraph. And it was so generic and so, it shocked me, to be honest. I was a corporal at the time, and I thought, well, where do I go from there? There's, how do I open that up? Because that is one paragraph on a number of illnesses, not just mine. So there was a lot of work to do. Mandy had that foresight, and we are now hopefully delivering and making it slowly change for the better.
There is an inevitability with the number of people serving in the RAF that someone listening to this at some stage could be through injury or illness or whatever, diagnosed with something which is a life-changing synopsis, a life-changing outcome. Would you say, from your experience, that the treatment, the support that they get from within the Royal Air Force is now in a better place than it was before? Absolutely.
I mean, even in the 5 years, coming up to 6 years of my diagnosis, I've noticed a huge shift. It seemed to be, and I joke about this in some of my dial-ins, that we're great at BAME, we're great at LGBT, we're great at all those networks apart from disability. And it's the last jigsaw in the puzzle, I believe, that the MOD have obviously taken it in their stride now. The ministers, down in MOD have also taken that in their stride. I think, the likes of Johnny Mercer have really helped matters as well. That they're pushing it from a lived experience perspective, and that's what you need. You need lived experience to tell their stories, to get the point across, to educate everyone. And the leaders down in MOD that I've come across within the network dealings that I've had are all on board with this. We just need to shape it and make sure it's robust. And actually, it's not a policy that fits all, because everyone has an individual case. And that's what I'm very conscious of when I talk to people that come to me for a bit of advice. I can't say everything's going to be good, everything's going to be well, because it might not. But if we don't ask the questions, we don't know the answers. So let's try.
I'm getting the impression that you feel that you are now pushing against an open door, at least.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely. And I think everyone in my Candid network, and I'm also one of the vice chairs now in the Air Disability Network, that's quite a new network. Everyone is pushing in the right direction with this disability and illness now. And within that, the caring community, because that's something that people forget about. When I was married, I'm divorced now, but when I was married, essentially I had a husband that was there to sort of care for me. On my Candid network, we had a Navy girl that had a disabled child, so it's not just necessarily the service person's needs, it's the family needs as well. And that's what we need to consider.
And also, with length of service comes aging parents and care duties that come into it. So there's a whole wide spectrum, as you say. And do you feel that the RAF now sort of accept that and reflect that across the board a bit more?
They do, yeah. And I remember my first ever Candid meeting, which was a bit of a mashup of us all sort of, it was a very emotional day, because we were all telling our stories so emotively, so passionately, so frustrated, to where we are now. Absolutely. And I remember listening to a story from an Air Force flight lieutenant who was a carer for her father who had Parkinson's, and the frustration she had as a commissioned officer at trying to get her line managers to understand her needs and her responsibilities outside of the workplace. And what I find with The likes of Midge and I, we work doubly hard generally to prove ourselves in the workplace. Carers do exactly the same. They're going to work and then they're going home and working again. And this is where the line management education piece is really important. You really need to know your people. You need to understand what they're going through every day, not just the service person, sometimes the service families. And because we push ourselves a bit more to prove ourselves, we'll crash more. And who's there to pick us up when we crash? It's going to be our families. So, there is this cycle that's probably a little bit unhealthy, but as time goes by, hopefully that cycle and the education piece will come together and there won't be that need for people like myself, people like Midge, to go into work full thrust, full throttle ahead.
Yeah.
Let's keep this is a manageable, reasonable adjustments is the word I like to use. Midge said something earlier about, it's about just wanting your line management to understand your situation. I think the frustrating thing for a lot of people that I meet is you get posted and you have to explain it all again. So we need a system that allows, I don't know whether that's a function on JPA or something, a management piece that tells that story along the line without the service person having to sort of go, can I have a word? Can we have a sort of closed door chat?
Midge, you're nodding away there and smiling. You're in agreement with that. If at the moment somebody listening to this, a junior NCO or maybe somebody fresh out of Cranwell is listening and is going to be taking on increased leadership roles within the Royal Air Force, what would your message be to them in terms of having an open mind, an open ear to this kind of situation?
Well, kind of tying in with what Georgie just said, don't get me wrong, my situation was very unique to me, and obviously I'm now working in the MOD in close proximity with the armed forces from all the services. And, there is an acknowledgement, and I'm happy to say that, over the last 5 years, I've seen great strides with regards to how we're accepted. The only thing I would say is, if anybody's coming in as a leader now or a manager now and they've got someone who has a condition or a disability within their section, it's like anything else. It's like with sport, the whole idea is this team ethos. You all work together. Just because someone has a physical disability or a mental disability, even something like dyslexia or whatever, that can be overcome as long as the support mechanisms are there. If those support mechanisms and that understanding is in place, that person can contribute. We talk about it at the moment within the armed forces of collaborative working, the whole idea of having different people from different diverse backgrounds. So the whole idea is if we have a task, you get several different perspectives on that task and how best to approach it to overcome and ultimately reach the objective at the end of completing or satisfying that task. It may well be that the person, in my case with the disability, may not be able to physically provide as much as an able-bodied person, but their experience and knowledge and background that they can contribute to that task can maybe enable or empower the able-bodied person to do that task more effectively. Because effectively, I was always a great believer in the team ethos within the military. It was one of the reasons why I liked it. I am as George will tell you, I'm quite a social person. I love to have a chat and a brew and a coffee and a beer and that type of thing. And I actually think that collectively we work better when we're allowed to do that. People that come together to fulfill that task normally has a positive impact on that task being achieved. And from my point of view, what would be great, and I have seen it, there's a lot more acceptance, as Georgie said, of an understanding of that now. It's not just that physical disability or that mental disability, sometimes the unseen disabilities that people have with their mental health issues and well-being. If we can get everybody working together as one and provide those well-being mechanisms in place, then we can achieve. And ideally, at the end of the day, I would hope that that's what our line managers, hierarchy and all that want us to do anyway. It's just basically us all coming together to achieve that task.
And if you think about it, go back to day one of basic training. This is the stuff that's instilled into you, and it's about working together, being stronger as a team and bringing different elements to it. So you're just bringing this into the modern setting here. That's
effectively it, yeah.
For yourself, the journey has continued. You're still involved in sport in a big way, including the Invictus Games, I understand.
Yes, I was very, very lucky to be selected for the Invictus squad to go to The Hague in 2020. which has been slightly postponed at the moment. I was very, very lucky. I started my Invictus journey, and a lot of it was really to, I found, and it's tying in exactly with what Georgie said earlier. When I left the service and went to work with the MOD, because I had a disability, I always thought I had to prove myself more than the people that I work with, especially initially, especially from my point of view, being medically discharged, it was almost as if I was still trying to prove my worth, even though I was working for the MOD now. But because I was in that same environment, I was very conscious of proving that I could contribute, proving I was good as my compatriots. Maybe a bit unhealthy at the time, because what it meant was, although I couldn't really have access to the sport that I used to play, work filled that void. So effectively, there was no respite from work. So I was, as Georgie said, hammering it at work to prove my worth, and then going home and not switching off from work. So what happened in the end, it came to a point where there was a realization that this wasn't healthy. And talking to a compatriot of mine, Pete Lauder, who I used to work with, who's at the time was still in the service, we went along this route of band of brothers, band of sisters. And from that, we thought, well, actually, what happens is we dared one another to have a go at the Invictus process. Pete was very, very lucky the first time he went through the process. We went to the trials in Bath in 2018, and he was selected to do, I think, the Chicago Warrior Games. So that was a really empowering situation for him. Loved it. He came back and says, "Oh, Midge, you've got to give that a go." And that's what happened. Then I applied for the Warrior Games in 2019 in Tampa and was lucky to be selected for that. And that's where I bumped into Georgie, who was my glorious team leader. So we were lucky enough to go out to do that. I initially wasn't going to apply subsequently for Invictus because I thought, well, I've had these games at Tampa, and I thought, because there was an overlap of years and they're in the same year, I thought it was maybe a bit unfair and I'd be taking an opportunity away from others. But, the people down at Help for Heroes or down at Tidworth says, "No, Midge, apply for it." So I applied with it with no real expectation because I'd just been to the Warrior Games, and then was subsequently very fortunate to be selected for the games in The Hague. Obviously, at the moment, it's been the longest training period I've ever had.
You're going to be damn good when you get there, though.
I've had my ups and lows with regards to that. So there's been different challenges with that, because obviously trying to stay motivated for what's normally an 8-month training cycle was extended because I'd just come from Warrior, but now it's almost 3 years down the line where I'm still trying to train and play. So hopefully we've just recently got the dates confirmed that what they're looking at is hopefully the 16th to 22nd of April 2022. The Rugby League World Cup is this year been quite inclusive, and what they're doing is having the running game at the same time as the women's version of the game and the wheelchair version of the game as well. So effectively we've got 3 tournaments with 3 individual cups all running at one under the auspice of the Rugby League World Cup. So hopefully, I'm looking forward hopefully to maybe being selected for that.
Fantastic. If you see Adam Hills from the last leg, take him out for me, won't you? Georgie, the Australian's going to be done. Georgie, coming back to you, you've mentioned a couple of times the dial-ins that you do. How does that work?
My colleague from Candid, so we have 2 Air Force advocates, so that's Wing Commander Kerry Spence Thomas and myself, and we've become very close and very good friends, and we sort of started doing mental health dial-ins for MOD. It was like an education piece for some of the senior leaders down in London, and they were really well received. So we were like, okay, let's branch this out. So there was myself. Kerry had breast cancer. She was a breast cancer survivor. There was a civil servant who had suffered with some quite severe mental health issues, who was happy to talk and share his story. And myself with my MS, and I had some quite bad, severe mental health issues last year, sort of through the first COVID. So we created this sort of dial-in, and it sort of grew arms and legs. And we were like, right, let's not stop with just mental health. What else can we do? So we found some chaps that had been diagnosed with prostate cancer at various stages. So we said, do you want to talk? Let's get prostate cancer out there. So we did that for World Cancer Day. And then we did an evening YouTube recorded event on generic cancers. So it encapsulated lots, female and male cancers. And then, we just do these dial-ins as and when people request. And it's all three services. So we invite everyone. It's anyone can come, anyone can dial in. And they're really hugely successful. And it's, for me, that education piece, because you don't have to have one of these illnesses to dial in. You could simply be a line manager who may have someone in their staff and they're just intrigued to know what the science is and the story behind it. And if we can get people that just listen in and take away a piece of advice as a leader, as someone that, or a peer, someone that can support, that's our job, done, really. That's what we need to do. And so, Kerry and I, we do a lot of these events throughout, especially virtually over the last year, and long may it continue. So, if you want to book us, I was
going to say, is there a way of finding out more if somebody who's listening to this wants to find out a bit more? What's the easiest way?
So the Armed Forces Candid Network, we have a Facebook page, we have Twitter, but also we do have an MOD multi-user account. But just get in touch. And we're just actually structuring our March for Men week in June. So we're doing a dial-in every single day of that week with different male health issues for disabilities and illnesses. So, Midge, you're getting a call soon, actually. I need to...
No worries.
Week.
That's fine. I'd happily contribute. It's a great system that's been set up. I've seen some of it, people talking about it at our place of work at Whitton. And I know there was a kind of one about neurological conditions and neurodiversity before. And I know some of the people that sat in on them to have a listen to them, and they were so well received. And as Georgie says, it's all about that education piece. We were saying earlier on, if our hierarchy understand and our peers and our subordinates understand, they know there's someone they can go to talk about it. Ideally, the stigma's taken away and you feel better supported. So as a result, it's a fantastic thing that George and that are doing with regards to it. It really is. Just wish they had that previously towards the end of my career.
Just to wrap us up here, to finish this off, it sounds to me the one thing that's coming across is things have changed. Things are changing as well in terms of how this is recognised and dealt with within the system in a more efficient and a more personal way. But if somebody listening to this at the moment is just at the start of this process and having heard the news or concerned about something, what would your message to them be?
As hard as it sounds, try not to worry, because as an individual, there's a process. We can talk, get in touch with, if you're Air Force, get in touch with myself for air disability, or if you're any of the other services or a veteran, still get in touch with me, because it's me on this podcast. I'll put you in touch with the right person. But it's all about having the confidence to come forward and say, this has just happened to me and I really don't know where I go from here. And if you just do that first door will open and we can try and help you move forwards. I can't promise the world, none of us can, because everyone is so individual, but we can at least listen and try and point you in the right direction.
Thank you to Georgie and to Midge for taking part in today's Inside Air podcast. If you're currently serving or you work as a civil servant in the RAF and have been affected by any of the issues raised in this podcast, you can contact Air-Disability Network at mod.gov.uk. The RAF Benevolent Fund and other forces charities have been supporting cases like the ones you've heard today for more than 100 years and continue to help members of the RAF family, past and present. You can find out what the RAF Benevolent Fund could do for you or a loved one at rafbf.org.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight's C-47 Dakota taking off from RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire. Dakotas served in every theatre of the war, most notably in Burma, the D-Day landings, and the airborne assault on Arnhem in 1944. Serving with the Royal Canadian Air Force under the serial number 667, It was eventually changed to KG667 to suit RAF serials, but this turned out to already be a Dakota which had crashed and been written off. It's now known as ZA947, which is why the serial worn by the BBMF Dakota doesn't match the age or era of the aircraft. The UK originally received almost 2,000 Dakota aircraft during World War II, equipping 22 RAF squadrons and 3 Royal Canadian Air Force squadrons. Now, this Dakota is the last aircraft of its type to be serving with the RAF. It's used not only for displays, but also to train pilots and aircrew before they move on to the BBMF's Avro Lancaster.
This is Reheat on Inside Air. I'm LAC Victoria Andrews, and in a change from our normal format, we would like to bring you a special message from Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston.
It is with overwhelming sadness that the Royal Air Force mourns the death of His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Throughout his great life, His Royal Highness has been the embodiment of service and respect, a constant example to us all, across all ranks and ages, our families and the wider Royal Air Force community. His Royal Highness served with distinction in the Royal Navy during the Second World War, fighting for our freedom. He was of that generation whose courage and resilience inspires us to this day. He has been deeply connected to the armed forces and to our cadet organisations ever since, holding the rank of Marshal of the Royal Air Force and until recently Air Commodore-in-Chief of the Air Training Corps. His Royal Highness was a talented, gifted pilot, earning his Royal Air Force wings in 1953, qualifying on 59 different aeroplanes and helicopters, and with nearly 6,000 hours at the controls, often flying the royal family himself in aircraft of the Queen's flight. We remember his dynamism, his curiosity, his passion for aviation and the technology that drives us forward. Above all, we recognise the deep sense of duty and a life that has been the epitome of service before self. On behalf of everyone in the Royal Air Force, serving and retired, I offer our heartfelt condolences to Her Majesty the Queen and the royal family at their loss, and our immense gratitude for the life and inspirational service of His Royal Highness the Prince Philip.
Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.